The line at the shelter wrapped around the block the first Tuesday of December, and Dora did not stop counting until she reached 47. 47 people in a coat that was not warm enough for the cold, 47 people who had nowhere else to go that morning, and 47 bowls of pinto beans and rice that Dora served from 6 in the morning until the last one was gone. She worked the community meals table at Calvary Fellowship 3 days a week, and on the days she worked, she wore the same green apron, the same worn sneakers, and the same expression she had always worn, the one that said, "You are welcome here, no questions, no judgment, pull up a chair." She had been doing it for 11 years. She was not a saint. She would tell you that herself if you asked. She was a 52-year-old cafeteria cook who had driven a 2011 sedan with a shimmy in the rear left wheel for the past 3 years, who had a daughter in nursing school in Memphis and a grandson named Cody who called her Mama Dora on the phone every Sunday evening. She was a woman who bought marked-down bread and store-brand everything and still somehow made dinner taste like something a person looked forward to. Her neighbors knew her by the smell coming from her kitchen window. Her co-workers at Jefferson Middle School knew her by the way she slid extra portions toward the kids who came through the line looking too thin. Feeding people was not what she did. It was simply who she was. She never thought much about it. She certainly never thought it would matter to anyone but the people in front of her. She did not know about Marcus Webb. If you are the kind of person who has read the name Marcus Webb in a business publication, you know it comes with a number attached. $41 billion, give or take, depending on the quarter. He was the founder and chief executive of Webb Logistics, a supply chain company headquartered in a glass tower downtown that employed 11,000 people in 9 states. He was profiled in magazines and on podcasts and at conferences where people paid several $1,000s to sit in a room and listen to him talk. He had an office on the 37th floor with a view of the river and a team of assistants who managed his schedule down to the quarter hour. What the magazines did not write about, because Marcus had never told anyone, was the winter he was 23 years old. He had come to this city from a town 200 miles south, arrived with a duffel bag, $60, and a contact address for a cousin who turned out to have moved 3 months earlier. He slept in his car for 11 nights. He had a job application in at a warehouse and another at a grocery distribution center and a third at a place he had passed on the way into town that had a sign in the window. But the sign had come down before he got back. He ate 1 meal a day that first week. On the 8th day, he ate nothing. On the 9th morning, he walked 4 blocks from where he had parked because he had heard from a man outside a gas station who saw something in the way he was standing, that there was a church down on Mercer Avenue that fed people. No questions. He was too ashamed to walk through the door. He stood on the sidewalk for 7 minutes. He had always been proud. His mother had raised him to carry himself in a way that said he did not need help. Needing help in the world he had grown up in felt like a category of failure. So he stood there on the sidewalk while his stomach made a sound that embarrassed him, even though no one else was nearby, and he almost turned around 3 times, and then the door opened from the inside. A woman in a green apron held it. She had not come out to get him specifically. She had come out to bring in a folding table from the sidewalk, and she saw him standing there, and she looked at him for exactly 1 second with an expression that held no pity and no commentary and no curiosity about his circumstances, just simple recognition, the way you recognize a human being in front of you, and she said, "We've got pinto beans and rice today, good and hot." She did not wait for him to answer. She just turned and carried the table inside, leaving the door open. He went in. He ate 2 bowls. He thanked her. She said, "Come back when you need to." That was all. He got the warehouse job 4 days later. He never went back to the meal line. He thought about that morning, in the small ways that certain mornings stay with a person for 29 years. He had never known her name. Dora had been working the lunch service at Jefferson Middle School for 14 years when the call came from the district office. She was in the middle of the lunch rush, her second period students were already coming through the line, and she had set her phone face down on the shelf behind the counter the way she always did during service because she believed the children deserved her full attention when she scooped their plates. She found the voicemail at 1:45 after the last tray had been returned and the steam table had been turned down. The message was from a woman named Patricia who identified herself as a coordinator with the Jefferson County School District. The district was consolidating 2 cafeteria programs at the end of the school year, and Dora's position at Jefferson Middle was one of 14 that would not continue into the following fall. Patricia's voice was careful and practiced, the voice of someone who had made this call many times. She was sorry for the short notice. Dora would receive her full severance per the union contract. She was welcome to apply for any open positions in the District Food Services program. Dora listened to the message twice. Then she put the phone back in her apron pocket, went to the supply closet, and cried for approximately 3 minutes. She was not embarrassed about it. She was 52 years old and had earned the right to cry in a supply closet. Then she washed her face at the utility sink, went back to the kitchen, and started the prep for the following morning, because somebody still had to do it, and she was still the one who was there. That night, she sat at her kitchen table with her bills spread out in front of her and did the arithmetic she had been avoiding. Her monthly take-home was $2,300. Rent was $840. Car insurance, utilities, her daughter's phone plan that she was still carrying. Cody's birthday coming in February. The severance was 6 weeks of pay, which sounded like something until you looked at what 6 weeks of pay actually was and what stood on the other side of it. She had a savings account with $4,000 in it that she thought of as untouchable, and now understood she would have to touch. She was not a person who panicked. She was a person who made lists, and she made one now. Jobs she could apply for, hours she could look into, contacts she had not called in a while. She wrote down the name of a catering company whose owner she had met at a church event 2 years ago. She wrote down the community centre on 5th, which she knew sometimes hired part-time food service staff. She wrote down the coffee shop near the university that had a help wanted sign she had been passing for a month. She went to bed at 11. She prayed quietly, the way she always prayed, not with any particular request, but with the plain acknowledgement that she was doing her best and that she had always believed her best was enough. She did not sleep well, but she slept. What Dora did not know, and had no way of knowing, was that across the city, on the 37th floor of a glass tower with a view of the river, Marcus had been running something quietly for several months. He had been talking, in the way powerful men sometimes talk when they are working towards something they cannot yet name, with his director of corporate responsibility. Her name was Leona, and she was good at her job, and she had learned to listen past what Marcus said to what he was actually trying to say. What he kept circling back to, across 4 conversations she could not yet make sense of, was community meals programs. He wanted to fund one. He wanted to do it in a specific way he was not able to articulate. He said things like, "The people who do this work," and then trailed off. He said, "There's a kind of person who shows up and just feeds people and doesn't want anything for it," and then went quiet. Leona eventually asked him directly whether there was a specific program or a specific person he had in mind. He was quiet for a long time. Then he said that there was a woman, a long time ago, who had held a door open for him when he was at a place in his life he did not talk about, and he had never found her again, and he had been carrying that for a long time, and he wanted her to do something that was in the direction of honouring what she had done. Leona suggested they start by inventorying the active community meal programs in the metro area. There were 11. Calvary Fellowship was one of them. The research took 3 weeks. Leona's team documented every program, every volunteer, every paid coordinator, going back 10 years in some cases. They were looking, at Marcus's request, for someone who had been doing this kind of work for more than a decade, consistently, without fanfare, in the specific register of no questions asked daily service. Someone whose tenure was not a resume item, but a practice. Dora's name appeared in the records for Calvary Fellowship going back 11 years, 3 days a week, with no gap she could not account for. She had shown up even during the stretch 2 years earlier when her daughter had been in the hospital for a week after a car accident. She had shown up the morning of her own mother's funeral and explained, when the fellowship's coordinator asked, that she would grieve better if she was useful. Leona put Dora's name at the top of the list. She ran a standard cross-reference as a matter of process. Jefferson County School District employment records were public. Dora Simmons, cafeteria specialist, Jefferson Middle School, current as of the previous fall. Leona almost moved on. Then she checked the current listing. Position terminated. Effective end of school year. She went into his office at 4:15 on a Thursday afternoon and told him what she had found. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "When is the last day of the school year?" Leona told him. He said, "Set up a meeting. Don't tell her what it's about." Dora received an email at 9 in the morning on a Thursday in late April. It was from a company called Web Logistics, a name she recognized vaguely from a billboard she passed on the way to the school, the kind of company that existed in a downtown tower somewhere and had nothing whatsoever to do with her life. The email was from someone named Leona Marsh, Director of Corporate Responsibility, and it said that Web Logistics was exploring a partnership with community food service organizations in the metro area, and that Dora's name had come up in their research as someone with substantial experience in direct community feeding programs. Would she be available for a brief informational conversation? Dora read the email 3 times. She almost did not respond. She was in the middle of applications, had a second interview scheduled at the catering company for the following Monday, and she was not sure what a corporate office wanted with her. She also did not entirely trust the phrasing of emails like this one, which had the smooth surface of something that might cost her something in a way she could not yet identify. She thought about it for 2 days. Then she wrote back and said she was available, and they set a date for the following week. She borrowed her neighbour Sherry's blazer because her own was starting to fray at the left cuff, and she polished her shoes the night before, and she drove to the glass tower downtown and found parking in a garage 4 blocks away because she was not going to let herself be flustered by not knowing where to park. She gave her name at the security desk and waited. The lobby was the kind of lobby that was designed to communicate that serious things happened in this building. Marble floors and high ceilings, and a young woman at the front desk who said Ms. Simmons in a way that made Dora feel for a moment like she had arrived somewhere. Leona met her on the ground floor, which Dora thought was a small kindness, coming down instead of making her find her own way. She was a professional woman in her 40s, direct and warm in the way of people who deal with a lot of different kinds of people. She took Dora to a conference room on the 5th floor with a view of the street below, offered her coffee, which Dora accepted, and sat across from her with a yellow legal pad. She asked about the work at Calvary Fellowship, how Dora had started, what the population was like, what the challenges were in consistently feeding that many people on a volunteer budget. Dora answered plainly. She didn't oversell herself, and she did not undersell herself. She talked about the logistics of hot food for 50 to 70 people in a commercial kitchen that was not quite built for it, about the food bank partnerships, about what it took to make sure nobody who showed up went home without a plate. Leona listened with the yellow pad in front of her and wrote almost nothing. After 30 minutes, she excused herself briefly. Dora sat with her coffee and looked out at the street and thought about how strange the week had been. Leona came back and said that the CEO of Web Logistics would like to say hello if Dora had a few minutes. Dora said that was fine. She was not especially impressed by titles. She had cooked for principals and school board members, and once for a city councilman who had come to a PTA dinner and eaten her macaroni and said it was the best he'd had in 20 years. She was polite with people of any station and equally comfortable with all of them. This was simply how she had been raised. Marcus walked into the conference room and stopped. He was a tall man in his 50s, well-built, with close-cropped grey hair and the kind of stillness about him that comes not from ease but from long practice. He was wearing a dark blue suit with no tie, which told her he had loosened something on purpose before coming down. His hands were at his sides. He was looking at her in a way that was not rude and was not calculating and was something she could not immediately name. She stood out of courtesy and offered her hand. He shook it, and then he did something that surprised her. He held on for a moment, not in an uncomfortable way, but as a person holds on when they are steadying themselves. He said, "Ms. Simmons, I need to tell you something, and I need you to know it's true." She waited. He said that 29 years ago, in December, he had been sleeping in his car 4 blocks from Calvary Fellowship. He said he had walked to the church and stood on the sidewalk for 7 minutes because he was too proud and too ashamed to walk through the door. He said that a woman in a green apron had come out to get a folding table, seen him standing there, and said, "We've got pinto beans and rice today, good and hot." He said she had left the door open and he had gone in, and that 2 bowls of beans and rice on that particular morning had been the difference, in a way he had never been able to quantify, between giving up and not giving up. He said he had been carrying that morning for 29 years. Dora was very still. She did not remember him. She served hundreds of people over the years, and she did not catalogue them because cataloguing them was not the point. The point was to serve them and to make them feel welcome and then to serve the next person. And she had done that faithfully. And that was all. She did not remember his face or his coat or the specific morning he was describing. She remembered the practice of holding that door open. She said quietly, "How did you find me?" He said, "We looked." She pressed her hand briefly to her mouth, not because she was overcome, because she was trying to locate herself inside this moment, which did not feel like anything she had planned for. He sat down across from her, not in the chair at the head of the table, but in the chair Leona had been sitting in, across from her, and he told her the rest of it. The warehouse job. The way the city had slowly opened itself up to him over the years, the company he had built and the 11,000 people who depended on it, and the 37th floor with the view of the river. He told her that none of it, not one piece of it, had come to him without effort, but that there had been one morning when he might have driven out of this city and not come back, and that he had not, and that her green apron had something to do with that. He said that Leona had been building out a web logistics community food initiative, and that he wanted Dora to run it, not as a volunteer, as a paid director. The initiative would operate in partnership with 6 community organizations across the metro area, providing resources, training and funding for daily meal service programs. The salary he named was more than 3 times what Dora had been earning at the school district. She looked at him for a long time. She said, "I need you to understand something. I did not hold that door open for you specifically. I held it open for whoever was standing there. I don't remember your face." He said he knew that. He said that was exactly the point. She looked out the window at the street below, at a city she had lived in her whole life, a city she had fed people in for 11 years, 3 mornings a week, in a green apron that was washing thin at the collar. She said, "When would you want to start?" He smiled, and it was a real smile, the kind that takes something away from a person's armor, and he said, "We were thinking immediately." The months that followed were the busiest of Dora's professional life, and also the most grounded. She had not expected to be good at the organizational side of it, but she was, in the same way she had always been good at understanding what a kitchen needed and supplying it before anyone asked. She met with the coordinators at all 6 partner organizations in the first 3 weeks. She sat in on meal services and ate the food, and introduced herself not as the director, but as someone who used to do exactly what they were doing, which was true, and which was the most useful thing she could have said. She drew up a resource map and a shared procurement system that brought the cost of basic staples down across all 6 programs. She hired 2 part-time coordinators, both of whom had direct experience in community feeding, one from a church program on the east side and one who had been volunteering at a day shelter for 8 years without any formal title. She kept her volunteer shifts at Calvary Fellowship. She told Leona she was not willing to give those up, and Leona told Marcus, and Marcus said simply, "Of course not." On a Wednesday morning in early October, Marcus came to Calvary Fellowship. He did not announce himself. He did not bring anyone. He parked his own car on the street and walked in and took a place in the line with everyone else, and when he got to the front, Dora looked up and saw him there and handed him a bowl of pinto beans and rice. He carried it to a table and sat down. After the service was over and the last tray had been cleared, Dora came out from behind the counter and sat across from him. They had coffee from the fellowship's battered percolator, which was not good coffee, and they talked for 45 minutes about the expansion plan and the budget, and a new program she wanted to propose for weekend meal kits for families with school-age children who depended on the free lunch program and had nothing on Saturdays. He listened the way he had listened in the conference room, with his whole attention. Before he left, he stood by the door and looked around at the room. The folding tables and the mismatched chairs and the fluorescent light overhead, and the serving counter with the steam table still warm at one end. He said, "I have a board dinner next month. I'd like you to come. Not to present anything, just to be there. I want the people I work with to know you." She pulled her green apron over her head and folded it over her arm. She said, "I'll be there." The board dinner was held in a private dining room on the top floor of the glass tower, 37 floors above the city, with the river laid out silver and distant through the windows. There were 14 people around the table when Dora arrived, board members and executives, and Marcus was already there, talking with 2 men near the window. He saw her come in and crossed the room to meet her. He pulled out a chair. Not one of the chairs along the side of the table. The chair directly to his right, the one that had been left empty. He said, "Right here." She sat down, and the conversations around the table moved naturally to include her, and Marcus introduced her not with a title but with a sentence. He said, This is Dora Simmons. 29 years ago, she held a door open for me at a moment when I needed it very badly. Everything you see tonight started on the other side of that door. The room was quiet for a moment. Dora did not say anything. She sat with her hands folded on the table and looked at the room and the river and the people looking back at her, and she felt something she did not quite have a word for. Not pride exactly. Something closer to the recognition that an act done in good faith, even one you do not remember, can carry further than you will ever know. She thought about the 47 people she had served that Tuesday morning in December. She thought about the morning 2 years before that, when her daughter was in the hospital in Memphis, and she had driven to Calvary anyway, and tied on her apron, and served because she was better when she was useful, which was true, and had always been true. She thought about her grandson Cody calling on Sunday evenings and the way he said, "Mama Dora," like it was one word. She thought about the list she had made at her kitchen table the night she found out she had lost her job, the careful handwritten list of places to try, and how none of them had been necessary. She thought that you could not always know what a small thing was worth while you were doing it. You could not always know whose morning you were changing when you held a door open. The not knowing was not a flaw in the design. It was the design. The kindness had to be given without expectation of return, or it was something else. Dora understood that. She had always understood it. She had just never expected the return to find her. There is a quiet she carries now that is different from the quiet she carried before. Not because her circumstances changed, though they did, not because the number in her bank account changed, though it did, but because she was seen. Someone looked and found her and said, "What you did mattered. What you do every morning with that green apron and that battered steam table, and no expectation of thanks or recognition or remembering, it matters." She still works the meal line at Calvary Fellowship 3 mornings a week, Mondays and Wednesdays, and the first Friday of every month. She still wears the green apron. She still says the same thing to whoever walks through the door, not to every person necessarily, but to the ones she sees standing the way Marcus once stood, the ones who are carrying something heavier than hunger. She says, "We've got something good today. Come on in." She does not wait for an answer. She turns and goes inside and leaves the door open. Months after the board dinner, after the meal initiative had expanded to 9 organizations instead of 6, and after Cody's birthday in February when Dora had sent him a card and a check for $100 and felt no strain in doing it, she sat in the parking lot of Calvary Fellowship on a cold morning waiting for the building to open, with the heat running low and the shimmy still present in the rear left wheel of the 2011 sedan, because she had not yet gotten around to getting it fixed, which was perhaps its own kind of message about who she was. She had a thermos of coffee. She sat and watched the street come alive the way she had watched it for 11 years, the same block, the same light, the same sparse early morning traffic. She thought about her daughter finishing her nursing clinicals in the spring. She thought about Marcus and the way he had held her hand for that one extra moment, and what that cost a man of his particular kind of pride to do. She thought about the 47 people, and the week before that, 39, and the week before that, 52, each one a name she sometimes knew and mostly did not, each one a life she could not follow past the door of the fellowship hall. She thought that this was fine, that this was, in fact, the whole thing. You give the meal. You hold the door. You do not keep a ledger of what you gave or to whom, because the ledger is not yours to keep. The world, she had come to believe, keeps its own. The building lights came on inside, warm and yellow through the glass, and Dora picked up her thermos and her apron and got out of the car. She had beans to start. If you have ever been in a place where someone showed up for you and you did not have a way to tell them what it meant, leave something in the comments. This story belongs to the people who hold doors. Stay with us for another one. This story is a work of fiction. Any resemblance to actual persons or events is coincidental. There are things about that first Tuesday in December that Dora has tried to reconstruct in the years since, not because she remembered it specifically, but because Marcus described it well enough that she can now see it the way you can see a photograph of a place you know you must have visited. The specific cold of that morning, the line that wrapped the corner of the building, the colour of the light before 8 o'clock in winter when the sun was still barely lifting itself over the rooftops across the street. She has tried to imagine herself at 41, which is how old she would have been. Still several years before she began to feel the particular tiredness of long service, still moving quickly through the steam and the noise of the kitchen, still arriving at 5:45 to start the stock and get the first pans going before the other volunteers arrived. She was, at 41, the same person she is now in all the ways that matter. She had her apron and her opinions about how to season a pot of beans, and a firm belief that a hot meal served without comment or condition was one of the most straightforward expressions of respect one person could offer another. She had not known that was a philosophy. She would have said it was just the way you do it. Her mother had taught her that. Her mother, whose name was Evie and who had died 7 years before Marcus walked into the conference room, had been a woman who kept extra food. Not because she had much, because she understood, in the way that some people understand from a young age, that there would always be someone nearby who needed some of what you had, and that the surplus you hoarded in fear was nothing compared to the community you built by giving it away. Her mother kept a pot on the stove almost every weekend. She made extra biscuits. She never asked who was coming before she figured out how much food there was. Dora had absorbed this so completely she could not separate it from herself. So when Marcus described the morning, the table she was carrying, the door she held open, the one sentence she said about the beans and rice and the temperature, she felt not pride but simple recognition. That was a Tuesday. She had done that on Tuesdays. She had done that on Tuesdays for 11 years, and she would keep doing it. The specific morning he described was not, from her vantage point, different from any other Tuesday morning, which was exactly why it had stayed with him. She had not treated him differently. She had not seen his potential or his future or the $41 billion that did not yet exist. She had seen a person in the cold who needed something hot to eat, and she had made it easy for him to come inside. This is the thing that Marcus said later in the one interview he gave about it, the one he gave on his own terms to a journalist he chose, that the thing she had given him that morning was not just the beans and rice. It was the ease. She had made it easy. She had removed the shame from the act of walking through the door by making the door mean nothing more than an entrance, a warm room, a bowl of something good. He had stood on the sidewalk for 7 minutes because he was sure that walking through the door would cost him something. She had, in one sentence and one left open door, told him it would cost him nothing. He said that was the most valuable thing anyone had ever done for him. He said he had spent a significant portion of his professional life trying to understand what that kind of ease looked like at scale. How you built systems and organizations that made it easy for people to receive help without being diminished by it. He thought the meal initiative was a step in that direction. He thought Dora understood it better than he did because she had been doing it in practice for a quarter of a century, and he was still working it out in the abstract. Dora, when she read the interview, laughed a little at this. Not unkindly, just the laugh of someone who has been given a great deal of credit for something that did not feel to her like a theory. She had simply held a door open. The thing about the initiative was that it changed shape as it grew, the way anything real does. The 9 organizations became 11 by the spring following the board dinner. An educational component developed, not something Dora had planned, but something that emerged from the conversations she was having with coordinators and volunteers who wanted to know more about sourcing and nutrition and how to stretch a budget across 100 meals without sacrificing dignity. She started a monthly roundtable, held the 3rd Wednesday of each month in a rented space at the community centre on 5th. The very same community centre she had written on her list that night at the kitchen table. The first one had 9 people. Within 6 months, it had 32. Marcus came to the 3rd one. He sat in the back row, which Dora noticed and appreciated, and he listened and did not speak for the first hour. And when someone asked a question about procurement partnerships with regional food banks, he answered clearly and concisely from what he knew, and then deferred to Dora for everything after that. It was the right way to be in a room he was not the expert in, and Dora thought that whatever else he was, he knew how to be in a room. She told him so afterward, which made him laugh. She said, "You knew when to listen. A lot of people at your level forget how." He said, "I had a good teacher." She said she didn't remember teaching him anything, and he said that was rather the point. Cody came to visit in July, the summer after Dora started the directorship, and he was 8 years old by then and full of opinions about everything, and Dora took him to Calvary Fellowship on a Monday morning and let him help carry boxes from the storage room to the kitchen, which he did with tremendous seriousness and a running commentary on the weight of each box. She tied a child-sized apron on him. He wore it all morning. He served rolls. He was too short to reach over the counter easily, so he stood on a step stool and handed out rolls with both hands to each person who came through, and he said, "Here you go," to each one, plainly and directly, the way Dora had told him to, without ceremony or pity or self-consciousness, because he was 8 years old and had not yet learned to complicate it. An older man, perhaps 70, with a plaid coat and a slow walk, took his roll and looked at Cody on the step stool and said, "Thank you, young man." Cody said, "You're welcome. We have beans too." Dora, behind him, pressed her lips together to keep from smiling. She thought about her mother. She thought about what it meant that this child, her daughter's son, her Sunday evening phone call, was standing on a step stool at 8 years old, handing out rolls the way she had handed them out, the way her mother had kept the extra pot on the stove, down through the years without anyone decreeing it should be so. Some things are passed without being taught. The roll the old man took, the door held open, the bowl of beans and rice on a cold morning 29 years ago, the ledger the world keeps long after you have forgotten making the entry. Dora's daughter, Renee, finished her nursing clinicals in March and got her first position at a hospital 40 miles from Memphis. And the day she called to say she had been offered the job, she cried on the phone for a few minutes, and Dora let her. And then Dora said, "I am so proud of you," and meant it with her whole body. Renee said, "I couldn't have done it without you." Dora said, "You did it. I just kept the lights on." Renee said, "Mama, you did more than that." They were both quiet for a moment. Then Renee said, "Is the shimmy in the car fixed yet?" Because she had been asking about the shimmy for 2 years, and Dora laughed and said she was getting to it. She got to it that April. "New rear wheel bearing," the mechanic said. "Routine maintenance, not a big thing." She drove home from the shop, and the car ran smooth and quiet, in a way she had not heard in so long she had forgotten it could sound like that. She sat in the parking lot of her apartment building for a moment with the engine off. She thought about the list she had made that night, the coffee ring on the paper, the names of places she had never ended up calling. She thought about Marcus at 23 years old, standing on a sidewalk for 7 minutes, too proud to walk through a door. She thought about who she had been at 41, and who she was now, and what connected them. And the answer was the apron, which was currently on the passenger seat, folded, because she had a Wednesday shift tomorrow. She got out of the car. She went inside and called Cody because it was Sunday evening, and she could already hear in her mind the way the phone would ring twice and then he would pick up, slightly out of breath the way 8-year-olds always are, as if they have just stopped running from something or are about to start. And he said Mama Dora the way he always said it, like one word, like the name for a thing that has always been there and always will be.